Welcome to Underrated and Budget. Today we're going to talk about some anti-enchantment pieces. Keep in mind that these cards shine the brightest in an enchantment-heavy meta. Harmonic Convergence is an instant for 2 and a green that reads return all enchantments to the top of their owner's libraries. While decks running green usually don't have a lot of trouble destroying enchantments, there are not a lot of options for good tempo disruption. Even if you're running an enchantment package of your own, being able to put all enchantments that your opponents control on top of their libraries at instant speed for as little as 3 mana does well to challenge the effectiveness of cards like Warstorm Surge and Smothering Tithe, while also being effective against rapidly accumulating shrines and the wide array of indestructible gods. This card works particularly well against enchantment-themed decks that produce a lot of enchantment tokens, like Go-Shin Tai of Life's Origin and Estrid the Masked, as well as enchantment-centric Voltron and Commander builds, like Zur the Enchanter and Rafik of the Many. And though I couldn't find any commanders that this card combos with perfectly, it fits on theme with the flash ability of Yeva and the instant cast trigger of Jadzi. Back to Nature is an instant for 1 and a green that reads destroy all enchantments, and though it seems to be fairly well known, I consider it to be underplayed at its relatively low mana cost. Its effects are fairly straightforward, so its utility is relatively obvious, but I believe many players overlook the fact that this card is instant speed when considering what to do about an enchantment-heavy meta. If your meta is fond of Sithis Harvest Hand or Suvasa the Sunlit, this card is hard to make a case against, and in my opinion it pairs well with Kogla the Titan Ape and Ayula Queen of Bears, as having the ability to consistently remove enchantments pairs well with those cards' fight triggers and their abilities to suppress your opponent's creatures. Patriotic Scorn is an instant for 3 and a white that reads, if you played another white spell this turn, you may play Patrician Scorn without paying its mana cost. Destroy all enchantments. While white has a wide variety of options for destroying pretty much any permanent type, budget cards that can be cast for essentially 0 mana are few and far between. The fact that Patrician Scorn is an instant allows it to pair well with other commonly played cards like Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile, as well as providing additional benefit if you're casting a Wrath of God or Fumigate. The often non-existent mana cost of this spell pairs well with card advantage commanders like Taigam Ojutai Master and Azor the Lawbringer, or could even have a home in Spellslinger or control decks like Noyandar Royal Shaper or Navinural Urborg Tyrant. Allay is an instant for 1 and a white that reads destroy target enchantment and has buyback 3. I personally consider this card to only really be viable in a budget-centric meta, but it can slot well into mono white or Boros, or even a Selesnya deck, where you're expecting to be low on card advantage, where you can cast this card and pay its buyback cost in the late game, or put it in a deck running green, where you can essentially guarantee to be able to pay its buyback cost. Presence of the Master is an enchantment for 3 and a white that reads whenever a player casts an enchantment spell, counter it. Though there are not many commanders this card pairs particularly well with, I feel like it's additionally underplayed because the Legends copy, as seen here, runs a price tag upward of $30, but it did get a reprint in Urza's Saga and can be purchased for as low as 25 cents. It has a fairly major downside in that it broadcasts its intent fairly forthrightly, so it's likely to be removed by an opponent who sees it as a threat, but it can work well in decks that run a generalized permanent reanimation package, like Urtai the Corrupted or Athreos Shroud Veiled, that have cards like Brought Back, Faith's Reward, Brilliant Restoration, or Resurgent Belief in the 99. Calming Verse is a sorcery for 3 and a green that reads destroy all enchantments you don't control, then if you control an untapped land, destroy all enchantments you control. This is a bit of an odd pick for this list because it's able to promote your own enchantment build while suppressing your opponent's. It's able to act as a bit of a crossover between Vandal Blast and Back to Nature, so long as you're willing to tap out when you cast it, and it pairs well with any Bant or Selesnya enchantment build. Barrier Breach is an instant for 2 and a green that reads exile up to 3 target enchantments, and it also has cycling for 2. An all-around great enchantment removal piece that's slowly seeing increasing play, and though it's not uncommon that between 3 opponents you'll be able to maximize the effectiveness of this spell, the fact that the text box stipulates up to 3 target enchantments as well as having cycling makes it all the more versatile. Personally, I'd run this card in every deck with green that's leaning into a removal package, and on top of having the exile get around the indestructibility of these creatures, it can be used to thwart the upkeep timing of Mogus God of Slaughter, the combat timing of Thassa God of the Sea, the sorcery speed ETB timing that triggers Perforos God of the Forge, and the saved up mana of Krufix God of Horizons. Or a Mutation is an instant for a green and a white that reads destroy target enchantment, put X 1/1 green Saproling creature tokens into play where X is its converted mana cost. In my experience, this card's fallen a bit out of favor in recent years, being replaced with cards like Bane of Progress and Terastodon, and while that makes sense due to green decks gaining additional advantage from casting creature spells, and the somewhat restrictive color pairing of this spell, I still think it's worth running in most any deck running green and white, regardless of whether or not your commander can take full advantage of it. It does best against high CMC enchantments like Thousand Year Storm, Sunbird's Invocation, Doubling Season, or Mind's Dilation, but can also be used on smaller enchantments, including your own, to make just enough creatures to get through for lethal on an opponent in the late game, or produce some blockers out of nowhere to save your own life when necessary. Auraflux is an enchantment for 2 and a blue that reads each other enchantment gains. During your upkeep, pay 2 or sacrifice this enchantment. Because enchantment builds in budget are highly powerful, this card does particularly well in a budget-heavy meta, but can act as a nuisance to previously mentioned Enchantress commanders as well. The fact that its ability doesn't target itself is valuable, as well as its relatively low mana cost. I definitely understand why it's underplayed, but it's worth considering in any heavily anti-enchantment deck that runs blue. While it does see a moderate amount of play in over 5,500 decks on EDH, Foundation Breaker, printed in Modern Horizons 2, may have been easy to overlook next to many new awesome additions to the format. It's 3 and a green for a 2/2 elemental creature that reads when Foundation Breaker enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. It also has an evoke cost for 1 and a green. In addition to having the added utility of being able to destroy an artifact, Foundation Breaker, unlike each other card in this list, is a creature, allowing its enter the battlefield ability to be maximally utilized by green decks. Rune of the Hidden Realm can be used to circumvent the sacrifice stipulation of the evoke cost, as well as providing you with an additional trigger when the Foundation Breaker re-enters the battlefield. In Eudora, you'll be able to destroy your target for the evoke cost, and immediately get a land out of the deal, and it functions as a second copy of Reclamation Sage in Yarok the Desecrated and Marin of Clan Neltoth. Thanks for watching. Keep an eye out for future videos where we'll be covering other use case specific budget commander cards.